Hi everyone, Bandanner here, and welcome back to the Broken Arrow Open Beta. Welcome back to my RTS Casts and Stuff channel. Remember to hit that subscribe if you haven't already. The competition continues between the Warno fans and the Broken Arrow fans to see who can give me the most subs. Today we are taking a look at the vehicle tab of the American division or battle group available to us in this demo/beta. So, not a huge amount to go through in this tab, so it should be a slightly shorter video, you'll be pleased to hear. Obviously the majority of it is tanks, but there are a couple of other units, but we'll just start at the top and work our way down. So the LAV AT in this case, as we discussed before, the LAV is a multi-purpose platform that can have many different configurations. This one doesn't allow for any transport, but it does come with a mounted TOW-2A launcher. Obviously, it also has the medium M240 machine gun just sat at the front here as well. In terms of the armor package, it can be upgraded to have the A2 variant armor and smoke upgrades. No change to anything else there. I will note that the LAV again is airdroppable. So this is one of those things that can be airdropped into the field out the back of a plane. So, you know, you can parachute this in near to the front lines to help take areas early in the game, or perhaps you just want to drop behind enemy lines and be a nuisance. That is possible on some maps, don't underestimate that. And it is also amphibious. So, armor package, bit of an upgrade, nothing too fancy. What about the weapons package? Well, it can either have the LAV AT, which is the standard TOW-2A missile. That is the direct fire weapon that hits front, side, or rear armor, in general at least, with the 1600 meter range and the 900 millimeters of heat penetration. However, it can also be upgraded to the LAV AT modernized with the TOW-2B top attack missile. This again is that specific top attack version. It is guaranteed top attack in this game by the top armor attack there. This will fire a missile that explodes above the target and fires multitudes of little things down onto the top of the target. The implication being that it does lots of damage to the top turret or the top hull of whatever it's fired at. Again, there are videos of this in action all over YouTube. I will let you explore that yourself. So, obviously upgrading this could be beneficial, perhaps worth the extra 25 points to get that top-down attack to guarantee more damage versus tanks. Speaking of tanks, there's a range of tanks here. Obviously, the majority of them are the Abrams, and then we have the M60 at the end, which is a special case which we'll get to. We start with the M1A1 FEP. Now, obviously, there are two M1A1s here. We might as well pin them and look at them together. What's the difference here? Well, not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things. So, the M1A1 HC and the FEP are very similar. So, they have the same machine guns. They have the same cannon. They have a slightly different round in those cannons. And their armor is slightly different. So 60 top for both. Slightly different front armor, same side armor, same rear armor. So the price difference here comes mainly from the actual rounds, I guess, more than anything else. Obviously, aim time and reload time is pretty much the same. So let's have a look at the rounds. So, what is the big difference here? Well, it's the penetration capability. So, the HC and its rounds can penetrate 450 to 900 millimeters kinetic, whereas the penetration on the FEP is 500 to 1000. Its dispersion is also less, so technically it's more accurate. So that's what you're paying the extra for, and its range. So the range here is 1300 and the range here is 1400. Most of the top end tanks in the game are 1400 for their normal rounds. Then each of them has another round, a heat round specifically, but they're both different. So the HC gets a 400mm heat round, or 400mm penetration heat round, that has a blast radius of 18, whereas technically technically, the FEP is referred to as a HE round rather than a heat round. It's still a heat damage in the game, so it does 120 millimeters heat penetration. However, its blast radius is a bit bigger, so technically it's more effective against infantry. There you go. And again, the range is 1400 instead of 1300. So really with the FEP, you're paying for range, you're paying for penetration, at least with the armor penetration kinetic round. And then I guess you're paying for a little bit more accuracy and a little bit more blast radius against infantry for the HE one there. But there's not a huge amount in it. The other thing I guess that will be the change is the HC gets a jammer and the FEP also gets a jammer. So no real difference there. And armor packages are Tusk armor upgrade for the HC and Tusk armor upgrade. There's really very little difference between them. I mean, that just makes the side armor the same on both of them with the Tusk armor. So very, very similar tanks. You are literally paying for extended range. Which, to be fair, extended range and a tiny bit more accuracy on those shells is probably worth it for the FEP, in my opinion. Because range does matter. And obviously, the closer you get to your target, technically, the higher the damage should be on the kinetic rounds. And I think that's why in this game, the same as it does in things like Warno and Wargame, the penetration has a range from 500 to 1000. So the closer you are, the more kinetic penetration you're going to do. Because the enemy is closer to the round being fired. It's not lost as much energy. Does that make sense? It should make sense. So what about the M1A2 variants? There's a few different ones here. So there's the standard M1A2 Abrams. This again is down to 1300 meter range. So that's something to bear in mind. Perhaps a reason not to take this one due to its low range. The dispersion is again a little bit worse off than the M1A1 FEP. Front armor, obviously very similar. We can actually look at them. I mean, we might as well stick them up together because we're kind of looking at this price range and umming and ahhing. So we'll just take its armor upgrade away and its protection upgrade away. So again, they've got the same main weapons. However, it's all about those shells. So once again, here you've got armor penetration, but it's the range that really makes a difference in the accuracy and the actual penetration itself. And then with the heat, again, with the M1A1 FEP, you've got the HE round, which is longer range and slightly more effective against infantry, where the M1A2 has something that is a heat round and slightly more effective against vehicles and less effective against it. It's very confusing when you start to get into all these details, because I'm literally just showing you tank after tank after tank, so I apologize. But basically, what I'm trying to explain is, of this top row, between the M1A1 FEP, the M1A1 HC, and the M1A2 Abrams, the M1A1 FEP is the better tank. Armor package is slightly better for the M1A2 though, because it can have the Tusk 2 upgrade. But if you're taking a tank to be a tank and do damage at long range, then the FEP is the best of those three options. Obviously, you are paying a price premium for it, because if you take all the upgrades off, let's do that just to prove that point. If we just take it all back to basics, obviously you are paying extra for the FEP version because it has those upgrades, okay? Because it has those better shells, you pay more. So it's a trade-off in price. You get a better set of weapon capabilities from the FEP because of those shells being longer range. Whereas for the other two, you've got shorter range. That's the simple way to put it. Then you've got another three tanks here, which are all variations of the M1A2. The M1A2 SEP, the SEP V2, and the SEP V3. As you can imagine, they all increase in price one after the other because, well, they're all better versions of the previous one. pretty straightforward, isn't it? Let's have a little look at these. So, it has the same main gun as the M1A1 and the M1A2. It also has 2 M240s and an M2 Browning. No real change again there. What about the actual ammunition? So, ammunition here is slightly worse than the FEP. So, the first SEP version... It's so silly to talk about them because all the naming conventions are so similar. Basically, this has the same range as the M1A1 FEP, but its kinetic damage is slightly less, or its kinetic penetration is slightly less. And it gets a heat round rather than a HE round, therefore it is better against vehicles or armored targets than it is against infantry compared to a HE round. Which is still technically a heat round in this game. Are you confused? I would be if I was listening to me at the moment. It's just because of the way they do things in these games. But let's move on to the V2 version. So the V2 version has the same armament again. However, this time, we have the 1400 meters, but we also have the same penetration capability as the FEP. However, we have the same heat round as the SEP. So, it's all changed again. So this is more along the lines of the FEP version for a lower price. But let's have a look at these. So I'm going to pin it. Okay. And bring this up. So let's compare the two. What is the difference here between these two tanks? Armor is the same. Default armor is the same. Stats up here are the same. They both get smoke. The actual ammo is exactly the same for that one. So the difference in this one is the FEP gets the HE round, the V2 gets the heat round, and that makes the FEP better against infantry because it's got a bigger blast radius, but worse against penetrating stuff with the heat round. But most of the penetrating you're going to do will be with the armor-piercing kinetic round. This is where you start to need to know about tank combat and how they use these rounds, I guess. The other thing to note is the V2 can't have a protection system upgrade. However, it can have a lot more armor upgrades. Okay? So this is where the big differences come in. So, for example, the SCP can have the Tusk and the Tusk 2. The SEP V2 can have Tusk, Tusk 2, Trophy Active Protection System, Tusk 1 with the Trophy, or Tusk 2 with the Trophy. So the Active Protection System, which obviously gets very expensive, but will give it 4 shots to protect against incoming missiles, is the idea there. Okay. So, lots of fancy upgrades for the armor, at least, for that. Otherwise, it is technically very similar to the FEP, other than the heat and HE round difference. Then we have the M1A2 SEP V3, which is the same armaments. However, it's got better armor this time at least. So this is the big bad boy tank. The front armor, as you can see, is 850 and 1400, more than the previous ones. In terms of the actual weaponry, it has a slightly better armor penetrating kinetic round. Yes, it's the A4 variant of that round and therefore does 525 to 1050 millimeters kinetic damage. Same range as before. And then it gets the heat round, which I think, is it exactly the same heat round? No, it's a different heat round to that one, so let's pin it and have a look at the two. Okay, so the difference is Absolutely nothing. The stats of the rounds are identical. Why give it a different name? It's the same gun and it's got exactly the same stats. Just give it the same ammo type. Wow. Oh dear. Fine. So, basically the SCP-V3 has better front armor by 100 for both the kinetic and for the heat. It's got a slightly better armor penetration round for the kinetics. It's got exactly the same heat round though. So there you go. Armor upgrades, it gets Tusk, Tusk 2, Trophy, Tusk and Trophy, or Tusk 2 and Trophy. So you can make it the biggest, meanest, baddest tank out there. But just remember that its weapons are actually almost identical to the previous one. The difference is it's got a bit more front armor. It's quite funny if you actually look through all of these tanks because they're all very similar. I mean, they are all variants of the Abrams, so I guess you'd expect them to be similar. But there hasn't, you know, in terms of what's in game, there isn't really a massive difference between them all. There's only a minor difference. I guess that's shown by the pricing. But the M1A1 FEP is obviously a pretty good tank here. Other than it doesn't get an active protection system, but it's got the range, it's got a very good shell for anti-infantry, whereas all the other tanks here just have a heat round which isn't quite as effective against infantry. Not quite. It's still effective, but not quite as effective. That felt like a lot of talking about Abrams tanks just to come to the conclusion that the FEP and the V3 are the best. And then everything in between is kind of a mishmash. Let's have a look at the most ridiculous tank in the game, the M60A1. Look at the state of this tank. So I deliberately didn't show this off in the basics video on the other channel. The reason for this tank is not like the other tanks. It is very lightly armored compared to the other tanks. It is... oh, where do you start with it? I mean, it's not a great tank, okay? It has its uses as a support vehicle, but it is definitely not going to be, you know, going toe-to-toe with an M1A1 or a T90. It's just not. It has a 105mm cannon, an M240 machine gun, and an M2 Browning machine gun. It's covered in random armor plates that have just been strapped on like something the Orcs would do in Warhammer 40,000. I mean, yeah, it needs like red stripes down it that are painted on, go faster stripes or something. It's pretty slow. It's old. Its actual weapon systems, well, not very good kinetic penetration, even at close range effectively. And then it has a Hesh round, which in this game is again treated as heat, so 200mm heat penetration, 20 blast radius isn't bad, and this is why I say, for me, this tank kind of fulfills a role of a support tank, in that I would bring it in, because it's cheap, to support infantry, and at least with some reasonable front armor, it's going to take maybe a hit from other enemy infantry with their anti-tank launchers, the short-range ones specifically. Not all, but some of them. But I wouldn't really be bringing this in to fight other tanks, because it's going to get minced. I've watched it get minced. I've minced other people's tanks when they've been brought in. They, you know, they're a one-hit kill. They're not scary at all. So, you know, they have their use as a support vehicle, but that's all I would bring them in for. Do not bring these in thinking they're a tank. Because although they are, they're not a modern tank. It's a very old tank. And the final vehicle here is the box. The box should look familiar. It's basically the M113, but this is the M901 A3. So it's a box on tracks with a Tortu launcher on top. Oh, and it also has the M240. It's very similar to the Recon one in the Recon tab, isn't it? Except this time it's got a missile launcher on top. Can upgrade it to the Slat and Smoke Art, you know, if you so wished. This is literally a missile platform, a TOW-2A missile platform. So it's a direct attack variant. It doesn't attack top armor, and it's going for front, side, or rear. 900mm of heat penetration, 1600 meter range, exactly the same as we've seen before. It's cheaper than the LAV. It's a lot slower than the LAV, and it can't be airdropped in. So it's less versatile. You know, the LAV has 100 speed, this only has 70. So you need to keep these things in mind depending on how you're planning to use it. Obviously, as I say, the fact it's cheap is nice. But it's not got anything massively over the LAV. Because the LAV with upgraded armor has better front armor than this. Oh no, it doesn't. I tell a lie. That goes up to 60 and 160, whereas the LAV only gets 60 and 60. So if you do upgrade it, technically it has better armor. I don't know. I don't really bother. I'd rather fill this with tanks, in all honesty. I have taken the LAV in one of my decks. It depends how you use ATGMs, I guess. But they're options. They're options if you're so inclined. ATGMs are scary in this game. They do a lot of damage to tanks. But equally, if tanks just charge in at these vehicles, they're going to do a lot of damage. So, something to bear in mind. And that's everything in the vehicle part of this deck. And as I say, it's just mostly a confusing mess of Abrams. So I hope I've left you not too confused going through all of those. But thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you all soon.